Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf tefav. Today's daf is sponsored by Dali and Nechemia Sasson in loving memory of their father, Solomon ben Leah. Okay, we're going to get started. Okay, there's a study guide for today, so you can look at it. I'm not going to share screen, but you can use it. It'll just help you organize the daf. We're going to start at the very bottom of Yudal and Amabet, Ha'arachin HaMetaltalim. So we started yesterday with this topic of valuations, and this is when the court has to come in, and we had a whole question: is it three? Right? For which ones is it three? For movables, it's three. For land, it's 10. Does one of them need to be a kohen? We saw different opinions here, and for people also, it's like land. Okay, so we're going to go through the different opinions here, and we're first going to try to figure out what does this mean, ha'arachin ha'metaltalim. Okay, so again, in the Mishna, it said hekdesho b'shlosha. Okay, that's hekdesh items. You sanctify, you evaluate them with three. But then it says ha'arachin ha'metaltalim b'shlosha. And Rabbi Yehuda says one of those three needs to be a kohen. What are we talking about? Arachina metaltalin. Isn't that hekdesh? What are arachina metaltalin? So my arachina metaltalin. Now, arachin is a term used specifically for valuations of people. The Torah, there's the whole section. That's what we saw yesterday. It started that section that we were talking about, where somebody says the value of this person is on me. So they want to know what is arachina metaltalin. Amarav Gidal Amarav be'omer erech klize alai. The first interpretation is when somebody uses the term arachim, which usually isn't used for this kind of thing, but attaches it to a movable item. And that's the obvious, really, that arachim, that are metaltalin. As I said, erech, this kli is on me. Usually you would say dime klize alai, the value of it. You wouldn't use the word arachim for that, but if you did, we're going to say that to Amarav Gidal Amarav. How do we know that this is what Rav Gidal Amarav assumed? Because he said, Ha'omer erech klize alai noten tamav. If you were to say those words, erech klize alai, the value of this kli is on me, you give its value my time. Adam yodea she'en erech kli. Everybody knows that there's really no arachim. It doesn't relate to vessels. Why doesn't it relate to vessels? Because arachim in the Torah has a set value. If you say erech of this person on me, you have to give a certain amount of money, depending on whether it was male, female, depending on whether, we're going to get to this in Masechet Arachim, depending on whether the person's age, whether they're older, younger. Okay, there's all different age ranges, but there's a set amount. There's no set amount for any vessels. There is no such thing. That's always a changing thing. And therefore, it must be gamar va'amar l'shum damim. But it must be what the person meant when they used the wrong term, so to speak, is what they meant is the value. We're giving the value of whatever it's valued at right now. And that's what you need the three people to come up with the value. Mishum hachi noten damav. And that's why you give its value. So now the Gemara says, hi arachin hamitaltlim. Well, then the wording doesn't match this, because you wouldn't call this arachin that are metaltalim. You would say arachin shel metaltalim vayale. You would say arachim of movables. Okay, it just the words don't match. To which the Gemara says, fine, you have a problem with that? Today, arachim shel metaltalim. Instead of saying arachim ha metaltalim, you would say, right, arachim that are movables, because there is no such thing as arachim that are movables. It must be arachim of movable property. And so just change the wording. Okay, second answer. Rav Chisda Amar Avimi, b'matpis metaltalin le'arachim. It must be where you did a case of arachim. Okay, the next two answers are going to take arachim literally as their usual meaning, where you said erech of a person upon me, and you have to give the amount, whatever the Torah sets. So what does that have to do with movables? Well, you did what was called matpis. You might remember that word from Nidarim. If not, I'll explain it. You were matpis metaltalin la'arachim. So I said I'm giving the value of so-and-so to the temple. I did an arachim. Now I go to pay, but I decide I'm going to bring an object from my house to pay for it. Okay, or I said this is going to be for my arachim. Okay, and I said this table, and then we have to go evaluate what's the value of the table. First of all, we have to see does it match up, and also probably I kind of said I'm putting the kedusha onto this table, but now I don't want to schlep the table to the temple, so now I'm going to redeem it onto coins. Okay, onto money. So that's what he says, arachin hamitaltalin are arachim that I moved onto metaltalin. Okay, so I had arachim that relate to people, usually the value of a person I'm bringing, but now I moved it onto an item, and now I want to get it off that item or bring that item to the temple. But let's assume I want to just remove it from that item and bring the money to the temple. So again, the Gemara says, "Hi arachin ha-metaltalin." The language doesn't make sense. It should be metaltalin shel arachim mibaile. It should be metaltalim of arachim, movables of arachim, meaning I turn the arachim into movables, and now it's the movables, and I want to talk about those. So again, the Gemara just says, "Fine, today metaltalin shel arachim." Change the wording. Third answer, Rabbi Yehuda Amar, be'omer el ki alai. You said I want to give my value to the temple. Okay, it could be really the value of anybody. But ba kohen ligvot mimenu metaltalim b'shlosha. Ba ligvot mimenu metaltalim b'shlosha karkaot b'asara. Now he's going even to the next case of the Gemara, the Mishnah. The Mishnah talked about metaltalin are 3, arachin and metaltalin are 3, and karka would be 10. So comes Rabbi Yehuda and says the following. It's not a case where I said I'm sanctifying, okay, I'm just reviewing. It's not the first case where I said I'm doing the erech, the value of metaltalin. It's not where I said I'm giving the value of a person, but I redeem it. I already put it and said the metaltalin are going to be for that, and now we want to turn that into money. No, it's where I said the value of a person. So it's like the previous Rav Chisda, where we're going to say it really is arachin, the literal meaning of arachin, which is the value of a person with these set amounts. But then I didn't pay. Comes the kohen, knocks on my door and says, "Hey, Michelle, you didn't pay. You have to pay." And what do? Because I'm unwilling. They seize something of mine for the arachim that I didn't pay. So if they seize movables, well, they have to know how much to seize. So what do? They evaluate it, again, in front of 3. And if it's karka, they do it in front of 10. If they're going to seize my property, they're going to seize it in front of 10 people because they're going to have to evaluate the value of land is done in front of 10. And that's the arachim ha-metaltalin, okay, where they take the arachim and they seize metaltalin on behalf of the arachim that I promised to the temple that I didn't pay up on. So now, again, if we take the 3 and we try to say what's similar to what, so the second 2 are similar because they both think arachim really means the term we normally use when we say arachim, which is erech of a person, of me. That's the same about the second 2. What's similar about the first 2, different from the third one, and this is what the Gemara is going to highlight right now, is in the first 2, I sanctified something that was movable in my house, right? Or it doesn't matter if it's in my house or not, but let's just say the first is that's all I sanctified. The second is I sanctified a person, like the value of a person I said I'm bringing to the temple, but then I moved that onto something that was metaltalin. So I already had done, and we're talking about metaltalin that's already sanctified. That's what's similar about the first 2. The metaltalin already have sanctified. They're been consecrated. Now I want to remove it and redeem it onto something else. For that, I need 3. In the third case, we're talking about putting sanctity on something because right now, all I did was say, I'm giving the value of a person to the temple. Nothing yet is sanctified. And comes the kohen, knocks on my door and says, I'm seizing property. And they want to put something, right, create a consecration on an item. So that's the Gemara's question right now. Amar le Rav Achami Difti le Ravina. Rav Achami Difti asked Ravina the following question. To remove sanctity from something, to put it onto coins, right, onto money, and to say, I'm now taking this money in place of the sanctified item. So then we understand why you need 3. But to create a consecration on an item and say this item will be consecrated, why would you need to do that in front of 3? Amarle says, why are you even asking that question? It's just very logical. Mali yule, mali afuke. What's the difference whether you're putting sanctity on an object or you're removing sanctity from an object? Afuke my time dilmatai. The whole reason why when you're removing sanctity from an object, you have to evaluate it in front of 3 to make sure there's no mistakes. Right? If you make a mistake, you end up with consecrated property here. Iyule nami domatai. Well, the same thing. If I promise to bring the value of a person to the temple and I now owe, let's say, 50 shekalim. So if the Kohen's now going to evaluate my property and say this is 50 shekels worth and he makes a mistake, then I owe money to the temple. Let's say he evaluates something that's only 49 shekels. I'm going to end up having a huge error against me because I should have brought one more shekel's worth. And that's also a problem. We can't make mistakes when it comes to consecrated items that are going to the temple. So because of the concern for mistake, we're going to do either which way, bringing it into sanctity, removing the sanctity, either which way it's going to be done bishlosha. Okay, that's the three options of explaining what this arachin hamitaltalin are. Now we're moving to Rabbi Yehuda, who said it's not just in front of three, but one of them needs to be a kohen. So now I'm going to Rav Papa Abaye, Bishlam Rabbi Yehuda, Hainu Dichtiv Kohen, right? Rabbi Yehuda actually has the more obvious approach, which is you need a kohen. But because it says kohen in the psukim, remember we saw it 10 times in all those psukim. Ela l'Rabbanan kohen lama lehu. So according to the rabbis who just say it needs to be done in front of three people, what do they do with the word kohen in the Torah? And the Gemara ends, as many of these sections have ended, with a kasha. It's difficult. We really don't understand the rabbi's opinion why they wouldn't require a kohen, why they don't take it literally when the Torah says kohen, there actually has to be a kohen. Hakarkaot tish'ava kohen. So now we have land. When land is evaluated, this arachin of land, it's done with 9 people and a kohen, meaning 10 people altogether. Minna hanimile. Where do we get this from? Amar Shmuel, and we made reference to Shmuel yesterday at the end of class. Asara kohanim ktuvim b'parasha. This is what we saw at the end of class yesterday. It says 10 mentions of the word kohen in that whole section. Chad legufe. So now, if it says 10 references to kohen, you would assume all 10 need to be kohanim. So where did you get 9 regular and 1 kohen? Well, chad legufe. The first one is for it itself. Ve chad le hanach have miut achar miut. Ve'ein miut achar miut ela l'rabot. Ta'afilu tisha Yisrael ve'echad kohen. Okay, this is a strange one. This is saying that when you have a word kohen, so it teaches you kohen, then you have another reference to the word kohen, then theoretically, what would you do? You would say the next one is actually come and say you don't really need a kohen because it's like a double negative kind of thing. Okay, once you have another mi'ut, what's a mi'ut? Saying specific. So it's specifically a kohen. Then it says also specifically a kohen. Well, that already comes to include, it doesn't actually need to be a kohen. So therefore, since you have one, which you need to teach you kohen, and all the rest are viewed as like another mi'ut, another mi'ut, another mi'ut, all of those are l'rabot, and therefore all the rest could be other people. So now the Gemara says, or someone's going to ask, Matkifla Rav Huna Bered Rav Natan. Rav Huna Bered Rav Natan says, wait, if you're going to say ein mi'ut achar mi'ut ela l'rabot, that when you have a limitation, another limitation, each upcoming limitation is a limitation after a limitation, which comes to include, you wouldn't get to 9 in a kohen. What would you get to? You would have 5 kohanim and 5 Yisraelim because every other one, right? Kohen and then again kohen. That means Yisrael. The next one's a kohen again, and saying it's a mi'ut. It's not a mi'ut achar mi'ut. It's there's mi'ut, then there's mi'ut achar mi'ut, then there's mi'ut, then there's mi'ut achar mi'ut, then there's mi'ut, and each time you should end up with 5 and 5 in the end. So again, the Gemara is going to end with kasha. This is actually difficult. Adam kayotze behem. Now they say an Adam, also if you consecrated a person, then it would have to be evaluated, their value, how much they're worth, should be done in front of 10. So the Gemara says, Adam kadosh. There is no such thing. You don't consecrate a person. Okay, you can consecrate an object. You can't consecrate a person. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, be'omer damai alai. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's not arachin, because arachin there's a set value. You wouldn't have to need to do any valuation. That's a set value according to the Torah. But if you say the value of this person is upon me, then you would have to give their value. You're not actually consecrating the person. You're just saying their value I'm going to give to the temple. Titania, as it says in a Braita, ha'omer damai alai. What do you do in this case? If you said the value of this person is on me, shamin oto ke'eved hanimkar b'shuk. How do you evaluate the value of what this person is worth? You see what the person that on the slave market. Okay, in those days there was a slave market. Thank God nowadays in most places we don't have slave markets. They do exist in some places, but very uncommon now. you would go and see, okay, this person has X amount of strength, they're this age, they're this, right? This is their ability to work. And whatever they would sell for in the shuk, that's the value of what you would give of that person's value. You would evaluate their value based on that. And now, why do we do this in front of 10? Because Eved eats kash karkaot. Well, since we already put this in a category of slaves, slaves are compared to, and this is based on the pasuk. It says, you're going to pass on your Canaanite slaves to your children as nachala. Nachala is like land. So they're passed down like land. So therefore, the laws of avadim are like land. And since land is done in front of 10, also this evaluation is done in front of 10. By Rabbi Avin. Rabbi Avin now asks a question, and we're going to get off on a bit of a side question. What about the hair of a slave? Se'al, okay, and specifically hair, not of a slave, but of a person. If you say, I'm giving the value of a person, or the value of the hair of a person, and the hair can be cut. Now, what exactly it means can be cut? It's ready to be cut is a good question. And maybe that's why you'll see at the very end of the sugya, we're going to distinguish a little bit between produce and hair. Okay, but right now, we're going to look at this hair as if it's ready to be cut. Okay, now, the whole question is, this is Rabbi Avin's question, since it could be cut, bekama. How, if you're going to consecrate the value of someone's hair, and it could be cut, it's ready to be cut. So is it kigazuz dami, as if it's already cut? And you might remember we've had machlokot like this in other areas. Or kigazuz dami ubishlosha, and then it's done in front of 3 because it's a detached item. Or dami, or is it viewed as an attached item and basically part of the person's body, uva asara, and then it would be in front of 10. So is hair that's ready to be cut considered part of the body or not part of the body? To which the Gemara says, Tashma, let's learn it from here. This source says, Hamakdish et avdo ein moalimbo. If you consecrate a slave, there's no laws of me'ila. There's no misuse of, if somebody uses that slave, benefits from the slave does some work for them, there's no laws of misuse of consecrated property. Why is that? Rashi explains, because Eved is like karka, like we just said. And there is no me'ilah when it comes to land. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer, moalim b'sa'avo. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, you're right, there's no me'ilah for the slave, but yes, for the slave's hair. If you use the hair, then you have a din of me'ilah. Why is that? Because he views it as if it's detached. And we have to say the following, which is kaimalan, that machloket was understood to be, or that the machloket between Tanakama and Rav Shpag is dibisalo home ligzos plige. It must be talking about hair that's ready to be cut. And what do you have then? Shmamina. We learn from here that the answer to Rabbi Avin's question is what? It's a machloket. Tanakama says, because the Tanakama doesn't relate to hair at all, the hair must be considered part of the body, and therefore no me'ilah. And Shimon Gamliel says, no, the hair is separate from the body, and therefore it would be considered detached, and therefore there would be laws of me'ilah, and that would apply to us as well. If you consecrate the hair, it would be done in front of 3, according to Rashbag, because it's considered detached. According to Tanakama, it would be done in front of 10 because it's considered part of the body. And now they want to suggest that maybe it's the same machloket regarding grapes. Let us suggest, but they're going to reject this, that it's the same as this other machloket. Titnan, Rabbi Meir Omer. Yesh farim shem kekarka ve'enam kekarka. There's some things that are like land, but not really like land. And the Ein Chachamim Modim Lo, the rabbis disagree. What are we talking about? Ketzad, how is this? Eser gfanim tu'unot masarti lecha. If I say I gave you 10 vines with grapes, full of grapes, and you're supposed to now return them to me, the 10 vines. And you say, what are you talking about? You only gave me 5. So what happens? This is a classic case, or maybe not, of modeh b'miktzah. You admitted to part. What happens in a modeh b'miktzah case? You admit that I was partially right about my claim. So we make you take an oath on the rest. But that's only, modeh b'miktzah only applies to movables, not to things, not to land. So now the question is, what are these kfanim? And were the grapes already ripe? So let's see. So Rabbi Meir mechayev v'chachamim omrim kol mechubar lekarka hareu kekarka. Rabbi Meir says you have to take an oath. We view them as if they're detached, basically. And the rabbis say anything attached to the ground is like the ground itself. Ve'amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina said about this machloket, ba'anavim ha'omdim libatzer askina. We must be talking about grapes that were ready to be picked. And Mar Savar Kibitzura Damyan. And Rabbi Meir says we're going to view them as if they were already picked. Umar Savar Lav Kibitzura Damyan. And the rabbis say we're not going to view them as if they're already ready to be picked. So let's go back to our machloket. Rabbi Meir, who says they're already ready to be picked, is like the hair, like Rashbag said. There's laws of Me'ila by the hair because the hair is ready to be cut. Whereas Tanakama is going to hold, right? The Chachamim here are going to hold like the Tanakama there. It said, no, hair is part of the body. The grapes are part of the land. Same exact machloket. But now the Gemara is going to say, lo, not necessarily. Afilu tema Rabbi Meir. Even if you say Rabbi Meir, ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Meir hatam. You could say that Rabbi Meir only said what he said by the grapes, that they're considered detached because, and here we're going to get to maybe a possible difference. And going back to the original question, what does it mean hair that's ready to be cut? He says, ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Meir hatam, but kol kama deshavkalu mikachche. If you leave those grapes when they're ready to be picked longer, they're going to start rotting. They're going to go bad, or maybe even eaten by animals or something. So, and therefore, we're going to view them as if they're detached because they should be detached and people want them detached. The longer you leave the hair, the stronger it gets. I'm not sure if that's true, by the way. But I think what they're saying is there's no major interest to cut your hair off. It's not like your hair is ready at a certain point. Like the fruits get ripe and then they start going bad. Hair doesn't get ready to be cut and then starts going bad. Although you could say, right, you start getting split ends. But that's why I wonder whether it really it is improving the longer you leave it on because it does start to get dead after a while. But I think the general idea is that the hair doesn't have this certain point in time where it's time to cut it. Okay. And if you don't, it'll start going bad. And therefore, the hair, maybe Rabbi Meir, who thinks that by the grapes, they're as if they're cut, would not say the same when it comes to the hair. Okay. So that's how we're going to understand that. Okay. Next. Dinei nefashot. Okay. Now we're moving to Dinei nefashot. Just one second. Take care of something. Okay. So, Dinei nefashot b'esrim v'shlosha. If we look back at the Mishna, okay, if you open to the Mishna, okay, it should always be, we're going to have to really go back a few times. So maybe good to have your hand open to the daf of the Mishna. Look, I did that. It says b'esrim v'shlosha. And now we're going to get to all the things you do in a court of 23. So we're done with the 3. We're moving on to 23. And what it starts off there is it says Dinei nefashot, capital punishment, and then it moves on to the rovea v'nirba. Okay, we're going to talk about bestiality, a bit of an unpleasant topic, but this is an animal. Okay, rovea or nirba. This is an animal that sexually assaulted a person or engaged in sexual relations with a person, or a nirba, which is a person engaged in sexual relations with the animal. So that's done in front of 23. So now, and the animal gets killed. So now the Gemara says, Kapasik vetane, loshna rovea zachar v'loshna rovea nekeva. It said rovea. It didn't say whether it was rovea, a male or a female, right? An animal that engages in sexual relations with a person, initiated. So either it could be whether they initiate with a male or with a female. So now they say, where do we get that from, though? Bishlama rovea nekeva. And when the Torah, it only talks about an animal that engages in bestiality with a woman or a man who initiates sexual relations with an animal. So Bishlama rovea nekeva dechtiva harag tet isha ve'et be'ema. That's in the pasuk about the woman. It says the woman and the animal get killed. Ela rovea zachar minalan. How do we know? There's no pasuk that says if an animal initiates bestiality with a human, it gets killed. So the Gemara says, well, we'll learn it from this pasuk. And if you look at the sheet, I brought the pasukim on the second side of the sheet. So we're now quoting the pasuk in Shemot chapter 22, verse 18. Kol shochevim behema mot yumat. Anyone who engages in sexual relations with an animal will get killed. Now notice in the pasuk it says someone who's shochev. That sounds like the animal was slept with. He's the nirba, not the rovea. So how do they learn it from here? Well, they say the following. Im eino inyan l'shochev, tenei inyan l'nishkav. Since it can't be talking about a man, and it's not talking about a shochev, it must be talking about a nishkaf. This is a principle we use called imeno inyan. If it's not talking about this, it must be talking about the other. Meaning, even though it says shochev, it's really where the animal initiates. Where do we get that from? Well, that's because in Vayikra, chapter 20, verses 15 to 16, actually talk about Isha asher tikrav kol be'ema l'rav'ah. I'm sorry, Ish asher yitenet shechvato be'be'ema mot yumat ve'eta be'ema ta'rogu. Okay, Pasuk Tevav already says Ish asher yishkav. So this Pasuk, which is not the second, it's actually the earlier one, the one in Shemot must not be talking about that one, because both the Psukim that talk about a man engaging in bestiality, one in Vayikra with all the Arayot, and one in Shemot, which is separate, that one can't be talking about the same thing as the other, so it must be talking about that the animal initiated. And therefore, Afke Rahmana B'Lashon Shochev. So now they have to say, well then, if it's talking about that the animal initiated, why does it say the man initiated? What are we learning from that? Well, it's la kushe nishkav l'shochev. It's to teach you that it's all one and the same, that whether the animal initiated or whether the man initiated, so it's to teach you exactly what we saw in our Mishnah, which is the rovea, which it didn't say rovea nekeva zachar, means an animal that was rovea, zachar nekeva, dino be'esrim v'shlosha, because all these cases are compared to each other. Shur haniskal be'esrim v'shlosha, shenemar shur yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat, k'mitat ha'ba'alim kach mitat ha'shur. So a shur that gets stoned, this is a case where a shur kills a person. When the shur kills a person, so the shur is supposed to get stoned, and the pasuk says v'gam ba'alav yumat, and also the owner of the shur is supposed to get killed. We've seen this a whole bunch of times, and the next pasuk says, but the owner of the shur can pay their way out and don't have to get killed. Okay, they can pay a ransom. Today we're going to talk all about those pasukim, and what they're going to say is that pasuk about a shur yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat, the shur will get stoned and the owner will get killed, which really doesn't mean the owner will get killed because the owner doesn't get killed. Okay, in the end, the owner pays a ransom. So therefore, what's it teaching you? Well, it's teaching you to compare if the owner were to get killed, then also the shur would be killed. Okay. Abaye Rava. So now Abaye says to Rava, where do you get this from? That Gamba Alav Yumad is teaching you that. Maybe, turning now to Abaye, maybe it's just coming to teach you that the person really should get killed. In other words, the simple reading of that pasuk is the person deserves to die. Yes, the next pasuk comes and says, well, you can pay a ransom, but it sounds like if you don't pay a ransom, you'll get killed because you're sure killed a person. You were indirectly responsible for a death. You will get killed as well. In which case, we don't have that pasuk free or available, and that's going to be the key here to keep remembering because we're going to have a bit of a back and forth, and you can follow it in the chart as well, in the sheet, which kind of organizes the structure. But basically, the Gamba Alav Yumat with Gamba Alav Yumat could just be teaching you the person's supposed to die. In which case, it can't teach you something additional because it's teaching you the law that the owner should die. So the Gemara says, Im kain lichto v'gamba alav alishta. Wait a minute. If all you wanted to say was that the owner should die, you would have written the pasuk like this. Okay, ashor yisakel, the animal should get stoned. V'gam ba'alav, and also the owner. And therefore, the extra word yumat doesn't need to be there. So that extra word is coming to teach our drasha that the shor is done in Esrim v'Shlosha, in a court of 23. But the Gemara says that's not true. You couldn't just say v'gam ba'alav. So again, let's just go through what we have. We have Abaye's difficult. The Mishna says it's because it says hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. We learn k'mitad ba'alim kach mitad hashor. Now Abaye says to Rava, but you need that pasuk to teach you that the owner should die. To which Rava answers, no, it could have just said gamba alav, and then you would have known the owner would die, and therefore yumad is unnecessary. But now we're going to say, no. You wouldn't have known that because the word, if you just said gamba alav, what would you have thought? Now remember, it said hashor yisakel, the ox gets stoned. If all it said was the gamba alav and also the owners, what would you think? Havamina beskila. Now, the owner for sure doesn't get stoned, okay? If your ox kills another person, you'll probably get sayif, which is the general punishment a person gets for killing another person. If you murder someone, all you get is hereg. Okay, generally, although we'll talk about this as a machloket about the order, but the most strict is skila, then sreifa, which is burning, then hereg. No, then right. Oh, yeah, you're right. No, I had it wrong. Hereg and chenek. Okay, saif is the second to least. Okay, there's a bit of a machlok. There is a machlok whether chenek and hereg switch off, which is strangulation is worse, or by the sword is worse. Hereg is by the sword, or also between the top two, sreifa and skila. But for sure, skila is in a higher category, and hereg, saif, which is the regular punishment you get for killing another human being, is definitely in the less harsh of the capital punishments, still capital punishment. So now they basically say, well, if you said the gamba alav, you would think skila, which is definitely not the case, right? So therefore, that's why you needed yumat to teach you not skila, okay? Because if you said the shore gets stoned and also the owner, you would think and also the owner gets stoned. So the Gemara says, so they answer back, right? So again, biskila salkadatach, no one would, even if you said the gamba alav, and you didn't say the word yumat, which would then mean the word yumat is extra, which is what we're looking for, because we want to explain our drasha. It's a court of 23. That's what you learn, that the shore is in a court of 23, just like the person. Well, nobody would have thought it's biskila even without the word yumat, because katal iu b'sayif mamono biskila. If the person kills with his or her own bare hands a human being, and they're only going to get saif, the death by the sword, of course they're not going to get a harsher punishment when their property kills. So you wouldn't have thought that. To which they say, "B'dilma dekatav rachmani yuma la'akule ilave la'fuke misayif lachenek." Well, maybe the word yumad is coming to say, okay, now again, if it's coming for something particular, we can't learn our drasha, which they learned in the Mishna. So now they're going to say what? Maybe yumad is coming to say, if you kill directly, you're going to get hereg, saif, which is number two of, right, the lower of the two, right? But still, chenek is less severe. So maybe yumat is coming to tell you if your animal kills, you'll actually only get strangulation, which is less severe. So that means yumat is not free. So now they're going to say, well, it depends where chenek is in the order. Because obviously we're not going to get more strict, but maybe the word yumat is coming to make it more lenient. So hani chalamad amar chenek chamor. If you say that strangulation is more strict, is a harsher punishment, then yumat is totally unnecessary. And then yumat could teach our drasha because it can't be coming to tell you a lesser severity because there is no lesser severity than saif. But ela lamanda amar chenek kil ma'ika lamemar. But if you think chenek is less severe, then perhaps yumat is there to teach you that the owner gets killed, but less severe than they would otherwise, which means it's not free to teach us this comparison of the shore and the person, and that the shore gets judged in a court of 23. And we're back to square one. So that was our first attempt of an answer with a lot of back and forth. Okay. But in the end, we don't have, right. We have one track where it could work if you actually think chenek is more strict. But if you think chenek is less strict, then it could be yumat is used for that and it's not free. So let's try another option. Now they say, lo salkadatach. It can't be that yumat is coming to teach you that the owner gets killed. Why? Well, because of the next pasuk. The next pasuk says, dichtiv im kofer yushat alav. You could pay your way out. Now, isakadatach bar katlahu, if we think you're liable the death penalty for doing this, haktiv lo tikhu kofer lenefesh rotzach. It says if somebody murders somebody else, they can't pay a ransom. So if this person was really deserving of death because they caused, indirectly, but they caused the death of someone else because their animal killed someone else, well then there is no ransom payment. You can't take a ransom payment if you murdered someone, in which case, it can't possibly mean that you get killed because if there's a ransom way out, then you wouldn't be getting the death penalty. To which the Gemara says, what are you talking about? Adrabah. That pasuk could all the more so prove that it really does mean you're supposed to get killed, which is mishum hi gufa. It's exactly that's going to prove it. That pasuk that says you can't pay a ransom because if you murdered is going to be what? Only if you actually murder with your hands. Katal ihu, if you murdered, lo tiskele b'mamon ela b'tala, you can't pay a ransom payment and get out of debt. Aval katal shoro, which is the way we always understood this pasuk, katal shoro lifruk nafshe b'mamona. Katal shoro, if you're sure killed a person, then you should be killed because you caused someone's death, but it was indirect. So in that case, we'll actually allow you to pay a ransom. Now, if we understand the pasuk that way, then again, gam ba'alav yumad is needed to tell you you deserve to die, but you can pay your way out, which means that it's not free to learn our drasha. So we've rejected this answer as well. Ella Amar Chizkiah, but here comes our final answer. V'chein Tana de Chizkiah, and also there was Breita that from the house of Chizkiah that said, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Mot yumat hamakeh rotzeachu, al ritzichato atahargo v'yatahargo ritzichat shoro. The pasuk when it talks about murder and the death penalty says, Mot yumat hamakeh, the person who hits, who smote the person and killed them, is rotzeachu, is the murderer. And therefore, mot yumat, that's what the beginning of the pasuk said, right? You will get killed, which means that only if you directly murder someone do you get the death penalty. You don't really get the death penalty, meaning if you don't pay your ransom way out, if you're short kills, you're not going to get killed. Okay? We don't kill you and only let you pay a ransom out, and if you don't pay the ransom, we'll kill you. There is no capital punishment for this, which means, and this is the bright that the Chizkiah brings, there is no capital punishment if you're short kills, which means that gam ba'alav yumad is totally unnecessary. What's it coming to teach you? That the Shiur haniskal gets judged in a court of 23, just like people who get murdered and go on trial for capital punishment in a court of 23, likewise the Shiur. So we finally gave a third and final answer, which actually stands. Now we have a very strange question that the commentaries all struggle with to figure out. You can look at the Tosfot if you want to see. We're not going to get into it because we don't have time, but I'll explain to you the Gemara and I'll explain to you the difficulty, but I'll leave it to you to search for answers. Shor Sinai Bekama. What's a Shor Sinai? What are we talking about? A shore that went up on Har Sinai during Matan Torah. When the Torah was given, the Psukim in Shemot Yubet, Psukim 12 and 13, I'm not going to read them inside, but basically say, no one can go up on the mountain. Anyone who goes up on the mountain while Torah is being given will be killed. And Sakol Yisakol, Yaro Yireh, okay, will get stoned. Im behema im ish, whether animal or whether person. So if there was a shore that's supposed to get killed because the shore went up on Har Sinai, okay, again, we're talking about a specific time in history. So the question is, why are we having a sugya about what a shore would have been judged in a court of 23 if it went up on the mountain? First of all, we don't even know if any animals did go up on the mountain during Matan Torah. And even if they did, what we're talking about now, about what happened then, why do we care about this? Good question. I'm going to leave the question aside, but that's the Gemara's question. How many people would that shore go in a court of 23 or not? Mi gamal sha'ami dorot or lo? Do we learn it from a regular shor haniskal case that we just talked about that's in 23 or not? Do we learn something from now, right? Something that was at a particular time from something that's for generations. Tashma, let's learn from here. Detani Rami Becheskel, he brought this brighta. Im behema im ish lo yichye. They quote the pasuk. Whether an animal or whether a person, right? Doesn't matter which one. Lo yichye, they will not survive. Ma ish be'esrim v'shlosha, af be'ema be'esrim v'shlosha. So in the end, we learn, yes, it's be'esrim v'shlosha because of the comparison to the humans. Just like in the pasuk we just had, where we compared it to humans, and it would be with 23. Some people say, I'll just give you one answer, okay? There's a lot of answers, but some people say they want to know, can you learn about this law that happened in a particular time? Can you learn that from a law that's for generations? Because sometimes we want to also do the reverse. They assume the reverse would be true. Can you learn from a law that was given at one particular time for a particular time and place? Can that be applicable to future generations? And that's a possible ramification of that. But anyway, there's a lot of answers that are given. Ha'ari v'haza'ev. Okay, back to the Mishnah. So now again, we have a list of these very dangerous animals. And it says about these animals that, right, can kill people: haza'ev, the wolf, the ari, the lion, the dove, the bear, the namer, the bardalas, different kinds of cheetahs and leopards, v'hanachash, and the snake, mitatan be'esrim v'shlosha. They get killed in a court of 23. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, kol hakodem lahargan zacha. Whoever kills these first, right, basically means take the law into your own hands and kill them, you will be rewarded. Okay, we're going to get to this word zacha with what reward are you getting. Rabbi Akiva says mitatan be'esrim b'shlosha, which is very strange because he sounds just like Tanakama. He says 23, also Tanakama said 23. So we're going to get and deal with all this. So the first thing we're going to have is a machloket about the case of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says you should take the law into your own hands and kill this animal. But in what case? Did this animal already kill someone? Or if you see a lion on the street, you should kill the lion because they might kill somebody? Very important question. It doesn't say so in the Mishnah at all. Did the animal kill? right? When it says mitatan be'eschim v'shlosha, it sounds like if you're going to convict them in a court, that would only be if they killed someone. But when Rabbi Eliezer says, you see them on the street, kill them, maybe Rabbi Eliezer thinks, kill them even if they haven't killed anyone. So this is a machloket Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rish Lakish, v'hu shehimito. That's only if they killed someone. Avalohi mito lo, but not if they didn't kill anyone. And here's an interesting thing the Gemara is going to say. Alma kasavar, he must hold. Yesh lahen tarbut ve'yesh lahen ba'alim. They can be trained and they are considered to have owners. In other words, you could have a nice pet lion. Okay, he believes a lion can be tamed and a lion can be domesticated. And therefore, if you see a lion, you can't just kill it. It might belong to somebody. Only if they killed someone and they've proven to be a hazard, you can kill them. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Alpha Pishaloi me too. You see a lion on the street, go kill it. Who knows what it could do? Alma Kasavar, Einlem Tarbuf, Einlem Baalim. He doesn't think they can be tamed, and he doesn't think they have owners, even if someone technically owns them, they don't really, because this animal is a hazard and you can kill it. Tanan. So now we're going to say, wait a minute. Let's use our Mishna to raise a question on one of these opinions. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol HaKodem L'Hargan Zacha. Now, Zacha means you get rewarded. Rewarded what? So, Bishlam ala Rabbi Yochanan. Lemai Zacha. What do you get rewarded by? Well, if you kill this animal, Zacha la'oran, you could get the hide. You could keep the hide. Now, this would only work if the animal hadn't killed anyone. You'll see why in a minute. Ela l'rish lakish lemai Zacha. Kevan shemitu. If an animal kills a person, that's like the shor and iskal. Now, you might have remember, we've learned shor and iskal is forbidden to benefit from that animal at all. So you can't take the hide because it's usher. They're usher b'hana'ah. Shavinu Rabbanan command Gemara dinayu. It's like someone, in other words, what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is, even if they haven't been killed yet, okay, the shor that gets stoned, you can't benefit from its body anymore. But this is as if it was convicted in court. Okay, once it's convicted in court, you can't benefit. This is as if it's convicted from in court because they're such dangerous animals. And therefore, Isurei Hana'aninu, they should be forbidden. So what does it mean, zakah? You get rewarded, you can't take the hide, so you don't get any reward for killing it. So what do they answer? My zakah, zakah l'shamayim. Oh, you get rewarded in heaven because you took care of something important. Okay, more like that kind of reward. And in fact, Tanya Kavateda, Rish Lakish, there's a brighter that supports this reading. Echad shor she'emit, echad be'ema v'chaya she'emitu, be'eschim v'shlosha. Okay, whether it's an ox that killed, any animal that killed gets ruled in a court of 23. Ushar behema v'chaya she'emitu, and any other animal that killed, that's Rish Lakish, only if it killed. Kol kodem lahargan zacha behen lashamayim. And here you have the zechiyaz in heaven. Okay, you get rewarded in heaven. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Now, Rabbi Akiva says 23. Rabbi Akiva Hainu Tanakam. It's the same thing. So what's he saying different? Ikabenayu nachash. Now the nachash is different. Some say that the nachash, that Rabbi Akiva excludes the nachash from the list. The nachash he holds like Rabbi Eliezer, that the snake you can kill. And this is based on, Rashi tells us, it's based on a Gemara in Baba Kama, where we saw that there was a machloket about some of these other animals, whether they're mu'ad la'olam or not, but everyone agreed that the snake is always mu'ad, snake is always dangerous, and therefore Rabbi Akiva, who says it's Rim Shlosha, says it's Rim Shlosha when it comes to the Aryeh, there's the Ev, the Bar Dilas and Namer, but not, maybe the Dove, I think I skipped, but not the Nachash. The Nachash, he thinks like Rabbi Eliezer, you see the Nachash, you kill the Nachash. Okay, last section for today. Ein Danim. Okay, now we get to the 71. We finished with the 23. We're moving to the 71. And the 71 we say, the first one is Hashevet, a tribe. A tribe that sins gets ruled in a court of 71. So the Gemara wants to know sins in what? Now, the only model we have for a whole group of people sinning is what we call Ir Hanidachat, that they have a unique punishment. Otherwise, a whole group of people sinning, they all get the same punishment that they would have gotten were they individuals. But in Ir Hanidachat, which is a city, that all the inhabitants go worship Avodah Zarah, the city gets wiped out and burned, and there's a unique halacha. The death penalty is different for each of them. It's a whole different halacha. So, Hai Shevet Chata b'mai. What did this tribe sin for? We don't have a model of a tribe sinning. We only have the Ir Hanidachat, the city. So, let's say they were all Machal Shabbos or any other crime other than Avodah Zarah or idol worship. We have no frame of reference. We have no precedent at all that there's a difference between a communal crime, a communal punishment, and an individual punishment for anything other than Avodah Zarah. So it must not be that. And if you say it's Avodah Zarah, like in Ir Hanidachat, where they all worshipped idols, come on, you're trying to say that they get ruled like like a ir nidachat, but then it doesn't match lo ki Rabbi Yoshia lo ki Rabbi Yonatan. It doesn't match the two Tanaic opinions that we know. Ditanya, as it says in the following Braita, ad kamo sim ir nidachat. One amount of people constitutes an ir nidachat. Me'asarav ad mea divrei Rabbi Yoshia, from 10 to 100. Less than 10, no. Over 100, no. Now, if you're talking about a whole shevet, they must be more than 100. And Rabbi Yonatan Amar, mi mea va'ad rubo shel shevet, from 100 to the majority of the shevet, but not above the majority of the shevet, which means filu Rabbi Yonatan lo kamar ela rubo aval kulo lo. Rabbi Yonatan sounds like he's saying the rove of the shevet, the majority, but not the whole shevet, because it's only up to the majority. If the entire tribe, then it's not ir nidachat either. You can go beyond ir nidachat, where you don't even get ir nidachat because it's so many people. So this doesn't match either opinion, and then we're stuck and we don't know what this means, and you're going to wait till tomorrow to see that there's a bunch of different answers given. So quick review of today. We started with 3 options of how to understand arachina metaltalin, what that was. We have the kohen. Where do we get the kohen? We raised a problem with the ones who don't think there's a kohen. Why not? What happens at the pasuk? We had the karka, the lamb, that's 9 and 1. How we got to 9 and 1, and that we said was also difficult. It should theoretically be 5 and 5. We left all those with questions. Adam kayotze behem. We said, what does it mean, Adam? Because you can't consecrate a person. So we said it's when you said the value of a person is upon me, not erchin but dame, and then it would be like treated like land. You evaluate in front of 10. Then we talked about the hair. It's ready to be cut. How do we treat that? Then we got to this, right? Then we had the machloket, and we tried to compare it to other machlokot. We got to the rovea and nirba, and we saw that rovea has both directions, and we had to prove that from psukim. The Shiur and Iskal in 23, we had to learn that from the pasuk, and then raised a whole bunch of questions on that drasha, but eventually said, no, really, the drasha stands. And then we got to the Shiur at Har Sinai, which was a little bit strange. In the end, we said also judge in 23. And then we talked about the machloket, about the really dangerous animals, whether you can kill them on your own, and the machloket Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Within that opinion, is it only if they killed or even if they didn't kill? And sort of approach about can these animals be tamed and domesticated or not? And we ended with this last topic about what is a shevet, and we're going to leave that as an open question, which we'll deal with tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day, Chodesh Tov, and Chanukah Sameach.